Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Jasmine. Today's card we're going to do Altenews Majestic Bloom, and we're going to create just kind of a general greeting card. So this would be suitable for birthdays or thinking of you, congrats, that kind of thing. Or you could change the sentiment around and make it a bereavement card if necessary. So it's just something really simple and really pretty, a feminine card. That you can do any color palette with. This one I kept really soft. So I started out by doing a mask using a full sticky back post-it note. And you can either trim this out by hand or you can just use the die. So I've got a piece of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 Neenah 110-pound Solar White cardstock. And I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black to stamp the outline of the flower. And this is a layered stamping set, so you use progressively darker shades with each layer you put down, and that will add your dimension and depth to the flower. So there I'm placing my mask. And then I'm adding the leaves that are also layered. There are 3 steps to these leaves, but I'm only using 2 of them just for simplicity's sake. And I'm using Altenew Evergreen for my darker shade. And then I'm going to use Altenew Frayed Leaf for my lighter shade. Because there was so little of that stamp on the paper, it kind of made it a little bit difficult and tricky to figure out how to line up the broad image stamp, but I finally figured it out. So I peeled up my mask for the flower. And so this is going to be the first layer, and this is going to be your lightest shade. So what I'm going in with is Simon Says Stamp Pale Blush Pink. And this is a super light, like a ballerina peachy pink tone. And the second layer is going to be Rosy Cheeks, also by Simon Says Stamp. That one is more of a truer pink. It doesn't really have that peachiness to it, but it is still very light. But I really liked how it popped off against the pale blush pink. Kind of surprised me, actually. I didn't think it would show up that dark. And then my third layer, which is going to be the darkest layer, I'm using Simon Says Stamp Hollyhock, which is a really pretty, little bit darker pink. And by using high contrasting tones in the layered stamps, you get more depth and dimension out of it. So I used 3 shades of Distress ink, Shaded Lilac, Tattered Rose, and Spun Sugar. I want to do a soft watercolored background. The problem I ran into is that the Neenah doesn't really like water. So it didn't blend like I wanted it to, and it did start to pill up in areas. So you'll see what I mean when you see it dried. But I just ended up using a stitched slopes die from Simon Says Stamp to give it a pretty edge and cut off the part that I didn't like. So I liked the colors. It kept it really soft, but they just didn't blend well. So if I were to do this again, I would definitely use watercolor paper. And the Simon Says stamping didn't blend with the water at all. You can definitely see all the brush strokes in it. So I set that aside to dry. I tried to do it with my heat tool just to see if I could get to even out a little bit, but then just set it aside and kind of left it alone. And so the next thing I did was I die cut 3 of these hellos. It's called the Painted Hello from Simon Says Stamp. Die cut 3 of those out of just some plain white cardstock. And then I'm going to use some Tombow Mono Multi liquid glue to glue those together. I ordinarily would have just cut this from Fun Foam with 1 cardstock on top, but I did not have any. I ran out. And tweezers are great for kind of pushing the little pieces together so it lines up properly. And the Tombow only takes, I don't know, 30 seconds to a minute at the most to dry. So this is a piece of basil textured white cardstock, and it's cut with a stitched rectangle die, but it was just too wide. It was like 1/8 of an inch too wide. So what I did was I just cut a second piece of white cardstock, of the same basil white cardstock, and trimmed it to fit the stamped piece. So I used some score tape on the back of the stamped piece to adhere it down to the white cardstock. So I just fit that down. Unfortunately, it's off camera. And so I'm going to heat emboss my die cut. And this is just a little distress ink cube, embossing ink cube that is just handy to add some embossing ink over the die cut. But I didn't get a lot of ink on there, so the first layer of this is kind of patchy. So I'm using some rose gold embossing powder by Stampendous. It has the prettiest golden pink shimmer. It's just gorgeous. And I thought the metallic finish of this really played well with the simpler smoother finish of the flower. Like I didn't add any Wink of Stella shimmer or anything like that. I just kept it plain and simple, really. And then that against the metallic finish of this embossing powder, just kind of, it looked really pretty. Nothing overdone, a nice dynamic between finishes. So I added a second layer of embossing ink and a second layer of embossing powder. And whenever you're heat embossing, and if you've watched other videos of mine, you've heard me say this 100 times by now, but you want to let your heat gun run for at least 30 seconds so it can get good and hot. And that way you avoid warping because you're applying less heat over less time to your cardstock or your paper or what have you. It just works out better. And you'll notice that I didn't get any warping on my little die cut. So for the background, I'm going to use some wood veneer paper. This is by Mixed Media 101, A Splash of Color, and I got this at Hobby Lobby. It's really cool stuff. It cuts with a die cut machine or a paper trimmer, and it doesn't splinter easily. I've had other ones that were hard to work with that way, but this one's really nice. And it's a cherry wood. It's actual wood veneer. So what they do is they basically shave the wood off of the tree to make it so it's a wood paper. And I cut that down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 and then attach that to a standard card base. I always use Neenah 110 pound for mine. And then to allow more of the wood to show in the background, I trimmed down the stamped panel. So it's a little bit narrower. So I centered that and attached that with score tape. And then I will adhere down the die cut with some tombow liquid glue. And then I put a acrylic block over the die cut just to give it some good adhesion. And then our card will be ready to go once that's dry. So thank you for joining me today. Hit that subscribe button if you like what you see so you can kind of keep up with me and see what else I've got going. And we will see you later. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.